Today is Ruth, the 3rd chapter, verses 1 through 5, and chapter 4, verses 13 through 17. I'm having some problems with this, but I guess it'll work its way out, hopefully. Okay. Last week we talked about Ruth, and we talked about her relationship with her mother-in-law, Naomi. It was in Ruth, the 1st chapter. The two of them had a very strong love and respect for each other, a strong bond. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, along with Naomi and their 2 sons, lived in Israel. They were Israelites. Therefore, they were Jews. They trusted and loved God with all their heart, the God of Israel. Elimelech decided to move, and this is by way of just kind of a review to bring you up to where we are today from last week. Elimelech decided to move his family from Israel to the country of Moab because Israel was having a very severe famine at that time. Now, Moab was a Canaanite country, but it was rich in fertile and natural resources at that time. We talked about, remember last week we said that the Israelites sent spies over the land of Canaan? And all the fabulous fruit and stuff that they had there. Well, Moab, again, being a part of Canaan, was still experiencing some of this fertile land and this productivity. And although there was great tension between Israel and Moab for many, many reasons, Elimelech felt that he and his family could make a living there. So he was a man who had courage, a lot of get up and go about himself. He didn't want just to stay there in Israel waiting this tide of famine to pass. He had courage. He had get up and go. He wanted better for himself, his wife, and his sons. So they started on their trip to Moab. Now, like I mentioned, in spite of the fact that there were a lot of tensions between Israel and Moab, he decided, hey, I'm going there because I think that I can do better for my family there in Moab. Now, shortly after they made their move to Moab, Elimelech died. It was a blow. Within the next few years, Naomi's 2 sons, who had married 2 beautiful Moabites, Canaanite ladies, 2 chocolate drops. Her 2 sons died, leaving Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law widows. You know, this was not a very good position for especially Naomi to be in. A Jew in a Gentile country. It wasn't a very good position for her to be in. Although a woman of God, Naomi became very angry with God. Her husband had uprooted them from their native land and taken them to a foreign country. Shortly thereafter, he died. Within a few short years, maybe 10 years, she lost her 2 sons. She was left as a widow, as were her 2 daughters-in-law, whom she loved very much. Naomi said, let's look at Ruth, the 1st chapter. This is all, like I said, by way of review. Ruth 1, verse 13. She said, let's see if I can find the right place here. Verse 13. Would you wait? Well, would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughter. She says, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me. That's what Naomi said. And then she goes on to say in verses 19 and 20, this was after Ruth and Naomi had gotten back to Bethlehem. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women there exclaimed, can this be Naomi? Now this was 10 to 12 years later. In verse 20, Naomi said, don't call me Naomi, she said to them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full. I left with my husband, my sons. We had all of our belongings. I left full. Having a problem finding my place here. Verse 21. Don't call me Naomi, she said to them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Yes. Why call me Naomi? Yes. The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. Now this was all in spite of the fact that Ruth, her daughter-in-law, had made a pledge to her to stay with her and to help her in everything she did. Look at verses 16 and 17. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and my God, your God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal very severe, she said, with me, if even death separates you and me. So there was a very loyal daughter-in-law there working with Naomi. But she was still upset and angry at God because of her losses. Again, she still remained loyal to God. Share a story with you just a little bit. We have a man here in our congregation who became very upset and bitter with God of sorts. Uh-oh. I'm getting ready to say Mr. Washington. But his girlfriend is here. His staunch supporter as a veteran is here. Anyway, as many of you might know, Mr. Washington has been a pastor for years and years in the church. Mr. Harold Jackson sent him to Africa. Was that to raise up a church or to keep one going?
Raise.
He went to Africa to raise up a church. And he was having some problems. And he became very angry at God. And Mr. Washington was saying, why this? Why, you sent me here. I didn't ask to come here. But you can't be upset with God. And as long as you want to understand why these things are happening, God is with you. He will bless you. He will help you. And that was the situation with with Naomi here. Now this brings us to our text for today, which is Ruth, the 3rd chapter. Let's turn there, Ruth, the 3rd chapter, starting in verse 1. Now this is after Ruth and Naomi had gone back to Bethlehem because they heard there were good news now. They could return. The famine was over. There was a new judge there in Israel. And they said, well, let's go back. 2 widows now. They go back home because they think they can do better. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you, where you will be well provided for." So Naomi is seriously trying to find a home for Ruth, her daughter-in-law, irrespective of Ruth's pledge to stay with her. Naomi was once a secure place for Ruth. Naomi realizes that at her age, she could not possibly provide for Ruth like a husband could. And she wants for Ruth every good thing that Ruth could possibly have. And then, going on in verse 2, she says, "Now Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Yes. Tonight, he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor." Boaz owned this huge property. He had acres of property. And he had ladies out there working. And Ruth, being a relative, was able to get back to Israel and work in his field. The threshing floor was a place where the grain was separated from the harvest wheat. The wheat stalks were crushed either by hand or oxen, and the valuable grain, the inner kernel, separated from the worthless chaff, the outside shell. The floor was made from rock or soil and located outside the village, usually on an elevated site where the winds would blow away the lighter chaff when the crushed wheat was thrown into the air or winnowed. Boaz spent the night beside the threshing floor for two reasons. Number one, he was concerned about theft, them working at night and threshing the wheat. And number two, to wait for his turn to thresh grain. So that particular, Ruth had been working in these grains. And chapter 2 reveals Ruth being allowed to work in Boaz's fields as a relative, as Naomi, her mother-in-law, had suggested, "Hey, you need work, let's do that." But now, on this particular day, Naomi is giving Ruth some very special instructions. We're in chapter 3. Let's look at verses 3 and 4. Naomi says to Ruth, "Wash, put on perfume, get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor. But don't let him know that it's Boaz, that you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." Now at this point, Naomi is concerned for Ruth's security, welfare, and safety for the future jumped into high gear. Her instinct as a mother, her instinct as a mama bear, her instinct as a protector, as a mentor, kicked in. Again, she was looking out for Ruth's best interest. Verse 5, "I will do whatever you say," Ruth answered. Now please, don't misconstrue what was going on here. Please don't think that there was some hanky-panky going on, or that Naomi was suggesting some kind of seductive activity here. This was a custom or tradition for those who lived during that time among the Jews. Let me read something to you here. By this act of Ruth approaching Boaz, waiting until he was asleep and covering his feet, that situation, by this act and this approach, Ruth was informing Boaz that he could become her guardian redeemer. Boaz already knew that Ruth was his relative by marriage, but that he could find someone to marry her by this act, or he could marry her himself. It was family business. Nothing romantic at this particular point. Turn with me, if you would, to chapter 2 of Ruth, and let's look at verses 19 and 20 to show you what we're talking about. Verse 19, her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." That was Boaz. Her mother-in-law was talking to Ruth. Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I work for today is Boaz," she said. Verse 20, "The Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead." Yes. Boaz was a Christian man, or I shouldn't say Christian man, he was a man of God. He respected God. He did things the way God wanted. Like I said, there was no hanky-panky going on right here. She added, "That man is our close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers." The Hebrew word for guardian redeemer is a legal term for one who has the obligation to redeem a relative in serious difficulty, as Ruth was. She was a widow and had been a widow for many, many years. So this was a matter of family business, and Naomi knew how to work it. And men, don't women know how to work it? Even up until this day. You know, they're calling the shots and making you think that you're in charge. Right? Right, Mr. Washington?
Indeed.
You know, you're in a clothing store shopping with your wife, and a friend comes up to you and say, "Man, what are you doing?" "Well, my wife told me to stand over here and hold her purse." They know what they're doing. Women are in charge. They know how to work it. Yes, you do. The longer you're married, the better you get at it. What was Boaz's reply after Ruth had approached him this way? Turn it with me, if you would, to chapter 3 and verse 10. "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. That is Boaz. He replied, "This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after younger men, whether rich or poor." Boaz was an older man. "You haven't gone after the young men," he told her. "And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character." No hanky-panky going on here. "You are a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of your family, there is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good. Let him redeem you. But if he will not, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Just sleep here until morning, until I have a chance to talk with him." So, that next of kin did not want to take on Ruth, as a redeemed relative. He did not want that responsibility. And Boaz did. Chapter 4, verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, that is all the ladies that were back there in Israel, they said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. That is that child. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. Some translations have that Naomi took the child in her arms and nursed it. It was not her child, but she took care of him as a grandmother would. The women living there said, Naomi has a son. And they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Interesting story. The rewards for loyalty. God brought great blessings out of Naomi's tragedies, even greater than 7 sons. Even though her through her tough times, Naomi continued to trust God. Yes, God can bless us, even though we go through hard times and tough seasons in life. Right, Ron?
Yes, sir.
Even though we go through tough seasons in life, God can still bless us. Brothers, we need to be like Naomi. And don't turn away from God when things get tough. Rather than say, God, why did you allow this to happen to me? Just trust him. And he will be with us. Now, I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, and you might remember from last week, Naomi had 2 daughters-in-law. Not Oprah, but Opha and Ruth. What happened to Opha? The Bible doesn't say. We do know that she took her mother-in-law's advice. She went back to her native country of Moab. We don't know if she got married. We don't know if she had children. We don't hear about any of that. We know what happened to Ruth. Ruth stayed loyal to her mother-in-law. Ruth had a child. Her child Obed was in the line of King David, who ruled over all of Israel, who down the line was the ancestor of Jesus Christ. The reward of loyalty. Wow, you know, what a tremendous lesson. Question number 2. Of the 2 ladies, Naomi and Ruth, which one of them was a virtuous woman? You know, we talked about virtuous women Proverbs 31, the virtuous woman, 2 weeks ago. Which one of them was a virtuous woman? Neither one of them, both of them were widows. Neither one of them had a husband. Proverbs 21 talks about, how this woman works around her house and deals with her children and deals with her husband. Which one of them was a virtuous woman? I say they both were. I say they both were. You don't have to have a husband to be a virtuous woman. Like the woman of Proverbs 31. Some of you don't have husbands. Some of you don't even have a gate. Proverbs 31 Proverbs 31 woman, her husband met at the gate with all the men of the community. Some of you don't even own a gate. Some of you don't have children. Many of you don't have money to buy a field, to purchase a field like she did. Many of you don't have servants that you can give orders to like she did, the lady in Proverbs 31. Many of you do, however, care for the sick and your loved ones. Right, Victoria? Care for the sick. Arlene, care for the sick. You do that. Many of you are faithful in your jobs. Many of you do good things for others when you have the opportunity to. Some of you are women of your word. You are loyal. And for some, loyalty is your trademark.
Yes.
It's always good, whether you're male or female, to have loyalty as your trademark.
Amen.
All of us can learn lessons from both Ruth and Naomi, two women who didn't let tragedies in their lives keep them from following God.
Amen.
Loyalty. There are rewards for loyalty. And like so many of the songs that we sung today, if we are loyal to God, He will be loyal to us.
Amen.
It's tough when you're going through that situation.
Amen.
Where's your mind? Your mind is not on God. Your mind is on the situation, the tragedy, or the depression that you're going through at that particular time. But like I said a few pages ago, don't ask God, why is this happening to me? Just trust Him. He will never fail.
Yes.
Fathers, we come before you.
Yes.
We thank you so very much for this opportunity
Yes.
to come before you, to hear your word,
Yes.
and also, Father, to worship you. That is so important.
Yes.
Father, one day out of the week, that's all some of us devote to you.
Yes, Lord.
Thank you for the opportunity. We pray that we can continue to grow. And we thank you, Father, for the wonderful things that we see that you're working in our lives, even right today.
Yes.
We thank you, and we come before you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Yes.
I'm going to ask Dave if you would come up and just ask a blessing on our meal,
Yes.
and then we'll have the praise team come up after that.
Let's pray and thank the Lord. Lord,
Yes, Lord.
you have been so good to us.
Amen.
And at this time of the year, we specifically focus on giving of thanks and gratitude to you, who is the giver of all good gifts to us.
Amen.
You've given us our physical lives, and you've given us the opportunity to have life in you, you living in us.
Thank you, Lord.
So Lord, today we thank you for the abundance, for the blessing not only of you, but that you have provided a grand feast for us that we can share with you and share with each other, because let us not forget that you're here with us.
Yes, Lord.
And every good gift comes from you. So God, we ask a blessing on this meal that we're going to eat. And as we eat and savor the good tastes of all the good food, Lord, you say that That's how you look at us, that our lives and our prayers are sweet savor to you, because you love us so much. So, but, Lord, thanks for the food. Thanks for your life in us, that we can enjoy you and enjoy this food. It's all from your gracious hand, and we ask this in Jesus' name.